Hi, Frank. Welcome to my podcast.
Hey, Victor.
It's very good to have you here. Just want to disclose this to the audience. We know each other in person. We both lived in Budapest at the same time. We had a few drinks together, I would say,
Yeah, quite a few.
and I think we had fun. So just want to disclose that. So tell me, how are things in Budapest at the moment?
Oh, well, it's just same old Budapest. Gets a little bit nicer every year, a little bit more modernized, but it takes it slow and easy, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great trait for a city to be slow and easy. Like easy in the sense that you get on with things pretty well. There's not much of headache, and yeah, then whatever you want to do, you do it regardless of your surroundings. I think that's what you want for a city to live in. You were traveling for quite some time. Yeah, I think for a couple of years or something like that, and you decided to return. Was that an accident or is that a decision?
No, it was a decision. Well, I left America a long time ago, maybe over 10 years probably. I think 2013 is when I decided the writing was on the wall for me. I just didn't feel like it was a good place to make friends, have a family, meet a wife. I felt a real sense of social decline, at least on the West Coast. And I wanted to try something new. I wanted to see what Europe's like. I have family in Budapest, so I came. And, I was still young at the time. I still had that urge to explore. I liked Budapest a lot, but I wasn't quite ready to plant roots. So I went to England, Germany, Thailand, Korea. I just bounced around Vietnam briefly, trying to see what the world is like. And then through all that, Budapest just felt like home. And it just felt like I had to come back, and it's a place I want to plant roots. People here are sensible and relaxed, and I think there's a good family ethics. People want to raise families if they can afford it. There's a drive to do that still. And you see kids running around at the parks and walking home from school. And, it's just things that I don't see as much when I visit America. I don't see like that vibrant family life of a city. So that really drew me back.
Yeah. I think that's something that Hungary has and stand out not only versus America, but I would say in the wider Europe. There is a huge appetite for people to raise families, and they connect to their roots in a way that we don't do it anymore in Europe. That was just my impression when I left 4 years ago. Is it something that you still perceive these days?
Oh, certainly. And the amount of twins you'll see in Budapest is insane. Like there must be some kind of a gene or something they're putting in the water here. But I walk around the city and I see twins in the strollers, twins, twins. So there's an explosion of families. I think the family policy that Orban had until recently did at least something to improve the birth rates here compared to the rest of the West.
Yeah, that's a great thing. The other country that does something similar on that regard when it comes to give incentives for natality, it's Israel, which is also a nation state. And I had a few guests here, and they all said that there is a vibe about life on the streets. It's even hard to describe, but people feel
Hmm.
that the country is going in the right direction, and they are participating on that. And that's what you want. But you wanna have this sense of belonging and not see the state as a cold entity.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I don't think Hungary's quite there yet. I think people feel a little disillusioned with the local politics here. But at the same time, I think people feel like things are good enough, improving a little bit, so people are not completely frustrated or outraged. There's still a little bit of optimism.
Yeah, I'd say it's very easy to be frustrated with politicians these days. If there is a species that is good at letting you down, I think that's politicians. And I say that with an open mouth and declaring here in public that my father is a member of a political party. So I kind of know
Hmm.
politics well enough. I wouldn't say I'm an expert because I never really explored in a way that I was able to, because it's not exactly my favorite field. I think politics are, say, a consequence of your road views. Like I know that both of us are very much into philosophy, trying to understand the meaning of life, and politics just come along the way. They're kind of a ramification. Is it something that resonates with you?
Yeah, I would say so. And I would also add maybe some pragmatism. I think politics has to solve problems to some extent. Maybe our democratic systems are not good at long-term problems, but they're still actively problem-solving, as opposed to trying to fulfill an ideological or philosophical vision for what might be the good life for people and society at large.
Yeah, I would say it's already good if the politicians are not a problem.
Yeah.
So, talking of politics, man, you are an American, so I cannot avoid that question. We are 5 days. Yeah, okay. I think you can already anticipate
No, it's
my
funny.
question.
Yeah, because I'm very critical of America, and you probably know that. I can't stop hating on America. And it's just funny because I don't really consider myself American, but this accent, maybe some of my mannerisms come off as very American. But I've been gone so long that when I go back, I feel a little bit a fish out of water. I don't fully connect with the culture anymore. I definitely have become very European in many ways, assimilated to talking more quietly, little things like that, or just a way to engage with people to break the ice. There's a little bit less small talk in Europe, a little bit more willingness to meet minds. I feel like in America, you really have to put on this sort of early friendship performance. But I feel like in Europe, you could just jump right into some heavier topics with people. And yeah, I'm rambling a little bit now. But no, it's just hard for me to put my thoughts fully together in this. I reflect on a lot because, Americans, they're vibrant. There's good people there. They're optimistic. They're go-getters. They build things. There's a lot to be said about American people, but there's a lot to hate. There's a lot of impacts they're having on the world right now that I particularly hate. So maybe
Can you give some examples?
Into. I do find that the American consumerist mindset coming through social media has been rampant. And it's something I've noticed through my travels is that when I first left the country 10 years ago, I felt that every country I visited to, there was maybe something a bit more hidden to their culture. I go there and I kind of meet the locals and I find things out. And there was a depth that you could explore and dig into. And I feel like over the years through social media, something's sort of disappearing from culture. I think people are not engaged with maybe the same things as before, or perhaps they're engaging with new things that are less connected to their culture, more connected to the American culture. And I just do feel like something is disappearing from the world and things are becoming more Americanized and homogenized. And I find it to be a very alarming trend. And I think one must realize what's toxic about American culture to resist that.
Yeah, I would subscribe that. Just we have a comment here from a Brazilian fellow who lives in the States. I don't know him in person, but we participate in a separate podcast, and he lives on the East Coast, and he's saying the West Coast is very different from what we have on the East. Can you make some opinion on that?
Yeah, that's true. And I can't speak to it all that well because I never lived on the East Coast. I have met people from the East Coast and, they maybe a little bit more European in mentality, maybe a little bit more serious. But I do think that overall, there's a sort of shallowness and anti-intellectualism to American culture that I think holds true on the West and the East Coast. especially going towards the South and Florida, which I have spent time in. You especially start to have a very different culture there. So I don't know. I'm not ready to exonerate America just because maybe Bostonians are interesting. And I don't think Bostonians are free of some of the core issues of American culture, which is mainly this consumerist mentality and this competition with everyone around you in a very visceral, materialistic way, where if you're not driving the right cars, if you're not having the right iPhone and your message in your chat comes up as blue instead of green, or whatever it is, because it's a big deal in America. It's a status to have iMessage instead of a Samsung or Android phone, and the message comes up a different color. So these little things, like you got the wrong Stanley Cup, the water cup, it's the wrong brand, and you're not as fancy and important as everyone else.
Yeah.
I find these things they're just insidious, and I don't find them to exist in Hungary, especially.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I will make a comment on that, but before I just want to share what Roberto is saying here. He is a big Trump guy, okay, Roberto, and he's open about it. He said we are coming back, and I think what he mean by that is the Republicans will take over the White House from next week, and he's coming over for the inauguration. How do you see Trump's return to the big job?
I think Trump 2.0 is looking to be better than Trump 1.0, but I'm not very excited about anything American these days, but I think it's positive in general for conservatism and the right across the world. It kind of puts wind in our sails. We see in Europe that there's a strong movement to the right at the moment. And I do think Trump has had a global effect on that, and I'm quite grateful for it.
Yeah, 100%. There is some domino effect, especially when those events take place in the States. We all know that there is a huge repercussion from the decisions and the direction that America is taking. Like we cannot stay immune. Like the only thing that the world can do when it comes to America is turn our back on America, but that's still a reaction. We cannot just ignore. Like America is too much of a powerful entity for us just to do our own thing. You can just be the antithesis of America, but still you are acting, taking in consideration what America is.
Mm-hmm. Well, my personal opinion is that Europe needs to slowly move towards more independence for themselves and move away from this North Atlantic agreement.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe you disagree or agree, but
no. I truly believe that if every state looks after himself, we'll be in a better road. And that is going back to a more philosophical discussion. And that's the same when it comes to ourselves. If we care about our own health, that goes back to Jordan Peterson's comment that clean your room before you go out and try to fix the road or something like that. Mm-hmm. So states should act in the same manner. They should first fix their own affairs before doing something out and about. So, and maybe Trump will prioritize that. Now he has a lot of pressure because there are loads of money involved when it comes to wars and other industries. But I think he would like to look after, say, topics like inflation, migration, and all that. And I think that's positive. That's positive.
Yeah. Well, what I'm not liking is the imperialism. It's to be expected, though, with him talking about Greenland, especially annoys me. Is all the campaign rhetoric was we're going to be more isolationist. We're going to go back to Monroe Doctrine America, focus on ourselves. And I found that suspicious. An empire doesn't necessarily want to give up the levers of power. And America's influence is global. It's not domestic. It's not necessarily the power of their economy, though that's a factor. It's also the control of the seas, thereby controlling the shipping routes. It's the petrodollar, commodities trading. the neoliberal economic system as they built it, that benefits them overall through the way GDPs are calculated or the stock market. The whole deck of cards is built in America's favor. So when I hear this kind of rhetoric from Trump, it makes me think that nothing's going to change, that we're just still going to have Europe under America's boot, and America kind of, chugging along slowly, trying to keep one economic crisis after another from exploding in our faces. And it just seems we're sort of stagnant because we're dependent on this American system, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to say that I was also disappointed. Like I was happy to see Trump winning, but when I heard those aspirations on taking over Greenland and do something, I don't know exactly what was the intent, but with the Panama Canal, it's like this was not on the cards. Like the whole thing was to look after our own issues, but it's not only him. There's a lot of people around and the team and interests. Of course, he has an upper hand, and end of the day, he's the person. He would be the person to blame because he is the face of the institution. So, like it or not, he needs to be made accountable, especially because he comes across as someone who always have the last word when he's talking to others.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, there's no way around on Trump on this. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And in particular, California, everyone talks about California as a woke republic. Is it really the case, or how do you describe California as a state in comparison to the other states in America?
Well, I did find before I left, I lived in San Francisco, and I did find that the wokeism that the internet started talking about in 2016 was already very present there 3 years before that. Who knows? Because I only moved there in 2013 and got the hell right out. But no, it was the feminism, the informed consent with sexual relations, and they were ahead of the curve on all of this. The whole talking about colonialism and decolonizing capitalism so that minority groups can have an advantage after being disadvantaged for so long. All this stuff was a common discourse if you went to a pub. And the way I see it is, so goes California, so goes a republic. So I figured America's headed in that direction, and they did. They very strongly went in that direction until I think this election, the population has really affirmatively rejected that progressive order. And I think the Democrats are going to come back with something different. So eyes on California. We should see what they come up with next. That'll be their testing ground for their next strategy.
And what is it about California that attracts wokeism?
Maybe end of the frontier. That's where everyone in America finally ended up pursuing a new dream. You have this whole vast continent, and that was the last stop at the other end of the ocean. I think that's part of it. Almost like a mystical presence the city has in the American consciousness. And I think maybe part of it's just newer universities compared to the older ones. Maybe they're more willing to pursue fringe ideas or progressive people who are a little bit outside the academic norm. Maybe they were given opportunities at Berkeley, whereas maybe Yale would be more conservative 50, 60 years ago. I think that these might be a litany of factors that come together and make it, the hippie movement settling down there, a lot of new age cults. It just all kind of blends together into this sort of very open-minded California culture, very laid back, non-judgmental, very pluralistic. So it allows a lot of ideas to thrive there.
And I think most recently, the other factor would be the tech companies. They want to stand out, let's say, in the corporate environment. So they would embrace all these ideas that are part of the post-modernism. So all these equality, racial theory, and all that. I think they also play a role. Now, I haven't been in California myself. I'm just talking from my interactions with other Americans, with what I see on social media. I've been to the States. I was in Arizona, which I know it's from an American perspective not that far from California, but I think there's also that. And the other one I would guess is the movie industry, the Hollywood, that also attracts wokeism.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of writers, especially. I mean, the arts in general attracts more left-leaning people. And Jordan Peterson had a wonderful theory on that. That you just need more trait openness, conscientiousness, sort of comes together to make the artist more inclined towards liberal thinking. So you have screenwriters that put a little bit of their leftist views into their plots, and maybe that wasn't so ham-fisted 20, 30 years ago, but it was definitely present. You watch movies from the 90s, there's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of, be nice to gay people, or, we're all a big racial family. Not necessarily bad messages, but, they're messages, they're political messages coming through art.
Yeah. Staying on the topic of writing, I have to tell you a big thank you. I haven't said that in our private message, but I will take this opportunity. You were the man who introduced me to Michel Houellebecq.
Did I?
I remember that. Yeah,
it
was you. And every time I talk to others that I'm about to start reading Michel Houellebecq because an American friend of mine said it will be a good reference for me, not only from an ideological point of view, but also his writing style and all that. Everyone said, how come you haven't discovered this man before? I didn't have an answer, but I said, at least I talked to Frank, and he told me that I should start to read Michel Houellebecq as soon as possible. And I did. It took me, maybe from the moment you mentioned his name, maybe it took me, 6 months, a year. But since then, I maybe read, I don't know, I can count with 2 hands how many books I read of Michel Houellebecq. And the more I read about him, the more I like it. And he became a huge influence in my writing, and even in the way I see the roads. I want to say thank you very much for that. What will be your views on Michel Houellebecq, and how do you encourage people to read him?
Well, first of all, you're welcome. I love to share what I've read, if it's been inspiring, and I especially love to hear when people have actually read it and been also inspired by it. So cheers. What was the second question?
Yeah, so how would you encourage others to explore Michel Houellebecq if they haven't heard of him?
So that's tough, because Michel Houellebecq, not necessarily something you just want to recommend to anyone. I mean, he gets pretty depressing in some ways.
I'd say for weirdos like, sorry, Frank, I'd say for weirdos like myself, not for the average reader.
Oh, well, that should be quite easy, eh? I think the weirdos just say, like, he writes about weirdos. I mean, his characters are, men who struggle to fit in society. And I think more and more, it's a very relatable message. I think men, especially younger Zoomer men, are struggling with this and struggling to find their place. And, Michel talks about what can go wrong or what can go right with a character like that.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Like, his message will resonate with individuals, especially men, especially young men, who are having a hard time trying to find a space where they can express, their own thoughts and get on with others. Like, so if you don't fit, among the sheep, you are a potential Michel Houellebecq reader, and you like good writing. That's another thing. And he has a great sense of humor. That's another thing I would highlight about his writing. I know he's dark, but the sarcasm is there. So there will be a lot of things that I said they're going to be heavy, but between them there is a huge amount of humor, good humor, and I think French are actually very good with that. They have this refined irony that I don't
Yeah.
see in many other even Voltaire, for instance, had that. And I'm not like a huge Voltaire fan. Like I like some of his stuff, some other not really, but he's a fantastic writer, and that's one thing that I think people should keep in mind when they get to know an author. They might not be on board with his ideas, but that shouldn't stop them to admire their work.
Oh, I agree. And I get actually quite frustrated, especially on the right wing, is that people don't want to read left-leaning authors, like great literary figures. And I think you do yourself an injustice, because these are human stories. They're, great writers are not beating you over the head with their ideology. They're telling a story from the perspective of characters that you can often interpret in many ways, which is why they're great works. I can't think of many great works that beat you over the head with a message. Maybe 1984 had a very pointed message. But, Madame Bovary, it leaves you with a lot to think about. With relationships, with post-industrial society, with the transportation. There's a lot of little things that you can just glean out of reading a great work of literature that may provoke your thoughts from whatever political mindset you have and improve you as a person and improve your style of writing and just make you more cultured and interesting to talk to at a cocktail party, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I would criticize when it comes to the right wing. I usually get along with right wing better than I do with left leaning, and it's no wonder. But staying on the critics, they are not that open when it comes to culture. They tend to despise art. They tend to see, okay, this is a field of the left, and I shouldn't get busy with that. No, I really think that's a terrible trait. And the opposite happens on the left. Like if the left thinks it's about economy and numbers, they think it's just frugal and superficial. So it's not their territory, which I think it's absolutely stupid because. And I would also add when it comes to the left, like I know a lot of people, liberals, liberals in the American sense, that not the classical, let's say, British one, that they think and say openly, like I don't know much about economy, but then they talk about equality, which is a kind of contradiction. If you have no clue about how the financials work, how can you dare to say a word about the so-called equality issue? Because you need to have some understanding of economy. I mean, you don't need to be an academic or have a PhD, but at least have some knowledge about it.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a big problem on the left is economic literacy. You have people advocating for outdated Marxist economic theories on Discord. You have people talking about Stalinism, and they don't even read neo-Marxist literature. It's sort of improved on these things. I don't know, man. We could get into how I'm very bearish on democratic politics in general because of this fact. Because the right, as I mentioned earlier, is very uninformed in certain respects, and the left is equally uninformed in other respects.
Yeah, it's very sad. So my good friend Roberto is saying here in the comments, or he's asking us if we prefer China, because we were criticizing the West, especially US. So he's provoking us, asking us if we prefer China. I think I can guess your answer.
But go, please guess. I'm curious.
If you prefer China to the US, I'd say.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say you don't. Like overall, you don't. But there are aspects of China that I think as the West should take in consideration and maybe apply them in a different manner. Or maybe maybe that's the way I see it, and I'm just projecting onto you. But
I'd say it's
correct me
pretty
if I'm wrong.
close. I don't have too strong of an opinion on China domestically, what they do, but on their foreign policy, I quite like overall, they work with economic partnerships. They're not working with regime change. I know Burma is an exception. But overall, they try to foster partnerships with nations that maybe benefit China, but they don't necessarily fracture that economy and turn them into, a minion, which is the American approach, is to just go in there, wreck things, get a puppet, extract. So I think the Chinese have a much nicer foreign policy, a much nicer way of doing economic partnerships. And I'm all in favor of Europe having closer ties with China, so long as we are cautious about it.
Which is what Orban does.
Yeah, which I quite like.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think Orban is it's very open and transparent when it comes to this whole philosophy. He is there for the Hungarians, and if that is if that involves handshakes with the I don't know, it's a president, no, Ping Xin or whatever his name in China, he will handshake his hand, no problem. If that's Trump, that's Trump. If it's someone in Nigeria, he goes for it. It's all about being on the Hungarian side, which goes back to what we were discussing before, that a state should look after their own affairs before doing nasty stuff with others.
Yeah. Well, on a global level, Orban does a good job. I'm by no means an Orbanist. There's a lot of problems in this country for sure. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of favoring international companies as opposed to making it easier to start a company in Hungary and thrive as an entrepreneur. Well, you can't have it all. But overall, I agree. Orban does do a little bit more for his people than the typical leader.
Yeah, I would also subscribe that he does well when it comes to protect Hungary, like the borders, the culture, the heritage, and all that. But probably his fault is when it comes to the local economy. Right, there's not much room for entrepreneurs to develop. I think that's more about. That's not really a conservative trait or right wing, more of a libertarian. And I think Hungary is not there yet, because it will take a couple of generations, and probably to a degree we shouldn't expect that from Hungarians. Like, if you think about that 40 years ago, which is nothing, there was still a freaking communist country, so it takes time for them to adapt. Maybe they will get there, but perhaps it's a question of, I don't know, another generation or two. We need to bury a few people before we can put that in practice, I think.
Oh, definitely. The older generation is completely stuck in a socialist mindset. But hey, if libertarian philosophy can blossom out of Austria, then something can happen here too. Hey, the libertarians, they got some things right about economy. They definitely do. I don't think you want to take it to the extreme of Randian global free markets, but making things a little bit easier, a little less friction, so people can get ahead, show their merit. Yeah, Europe needs that in general overall. There's definitely too many guardrails, too much red tape, and it's hard to be an entrepreneur in Europe. It's very hard.
That's probably the best thing about America, that that avenue, it's open and people can give it a try. Now they might face some issues, they might face some challenges, they might hurt themselves, but at least the opportunity is there. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, they know that part of the reason our economy is so great is that they made those opportunities, that they allow people to innovate. And Europe's starting to figure it out slowly but surely. Mario Draghi gave this whole speech where he recommended some libertarian ideas, shared incorporation laws for all of Europe. So if you have a tech company in Portugal, You can operate anywhere and hire people from anywhere with less friction. It's just a matter of implementing it. And that's where the Prussian, European, heavy layered bureaucracy prevents us from doing things quickly. But I think the recognition that things need to change is starting to blossom.
So one of the things you are putting a lot of effort in is Substack. I'd like to ask you, how is it going and what exactly are you doing there? And I will put the link in the description so people can follow or have a look and maybe join your book club. So if you can take us through what are you doing there, I think that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, so I have a Substack, Utterly Correct. And it's sort of the culmination of years of just shit posting on the internet about politics. And I started on 4chan and Reddit, Discord, just, being a troll, maybe being a little nasty and condescending sometimes. I'm sort of a well-read person, so I come in and I just smack people around with my big, well-read dick. And I decided that, why am I wasting my time writing 3 long, eloquent paragraphs about why this, 23-year-old on Discord's retarded just to get a laugh out of everyone, when I could actually put things to use and write a fully fledged article, try to incorporate philosophy, evidence, think about it a little bit more, but try to incorporate some of my humor, I guess, which I really haven't done so much. I've really actually pivoted towards taking this very seriously. And I am very concerned with overall the state of politics on the right, because I'm conservative leaning myself. I find the left is beyond the pale at this point, but I don't find that, Trump is not the answer, I don't think. I think the problems that we have are something that we're going to hit 30 years down the line with, I think, this infinite growth of capitalism. So I share that criticism with the left, that we need to be aware that we might run out of rare earth minerals. We might have a Great Depression. And I think that where I bring my conservative perspective is we need to have a relocalization of our economies. We need to think about bringing industry back, which Trump did talk about. I don't know if that's going to be put into practice the way I see it, because I think we need a massive local revitalization of our economies, where we need to be creating goods, clothing, shoes. We need to do a lot of this locally. And then we can protect our cultures as well. If our economic activity is less dependent on international trade, then naturally communities will form more readily locally. People will trade locally. And just these small realizations I had, I realized I didn't have enough theoretical insight into. So my Substack is partly trying to get people to see that you can think about relocalization from a conservative perspective. Conservatives don't have to be hyper-focused on capitalism and free markets, but also as a learning experience, whereas I'm reading a lot when I'm creating my works. I am reading, right here in front of me, I have my camera stacked on a pile of 5 books. I've got Heidegger, Foucault, Agamben. I've got Sartre. I've got Nietzsche. So I've got this, stack right here. I'm constantly reading, constantly trying to bring the best quality content. I'm looking to get my PhD next year or two, apply for that program, and then maybe shift from only being a Substacker to actually working in a think tank. And so I don't know, I'm at this sort of growing stage where I want my audience to grow with me. So if you're interested in learning about some really heavy philosophy, but you're going to be guided through it as an introduction, because I'm introducing myself to a lot of this work as I'm writing about it.
Interesting fact. One of the books you have there is Heidegger. Okay, and where am I going with that? And before I go any further, I wonder. Before I go any further with this comment, I have to say that Heidegger is one of my favorite philosophers, and maybe that will shock some people because they all saw me on my advocacy for Israel, and as we all, or as many people know, Heidegger was a part of the how do you call the mustache
Nazi
party,
party.
because we cannot, but in
Oh, you
YouTube,
can't
you don't
say
like,
shit.
you can say that.
Fucking YouTube.
It's okay.
Oh no, I said fuck now. And I'm smoking. You're demonetized for sure.
Well, there's no money on the table, so it's fine. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So tell me, how do you see the current wave of anti-Semitism in the world? Not just in America, but all over the world, especially after October 7.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've actually been thinking about this topic for Substack. Because I've sort of, okay, I guess I'll break down my view on this. The state of Israel itself and their actions currently, I've come to a point where I'm sort of ambivalent. Like, Israel's doing what Israel needs to do for their country. I don't have an in-depth perspective on the entire history. Of course, I know quite a bit from the 6 Days War onward, but not enough. Not enough that I can equivocally say, yeah, this is who's right, this is who's wrong, this is why, these are my moral principles. So I'm ambivalent. I don't really care what Israel does. That being said, there's another layer to this where you have people talking about Zionism and anti-Zionism. Okay, well, am I a Zionist? Yes, because why would Israel not have the permission to exist as a country? And even if you disagree with Zionism in the 1920s, it's happened. It's there, the state of Israel. So this talk about anti-Zionism, I find to be quite motivated by anti-Semitism. And then I break it down even further where you have sort of these, you have anti-Semitic Zionists, you have philo-Semitic anti-Zionists, which is a contradiction, but it exists. And then you have anti-Semitic anti-Zionists who probably want all Jews just be wiped out anyway. Like they don't get a choice here. You're not allowed to be there. I don't want you in my country either. Just die. So, I mean, I laugh because it's absurd, but I don't know what you can do about this. And I don't really know what motivates it either, because I think about Sartre and his opinions about anti-Semitism sort of stemming from some form of jealousy, which I'm not really sure if that really stands up to scrutiny completely. You have anti-Semitism as an other, but in our global world, you have lots of minority groups that people encounter, but there's still people, especially on the right, hold a specific frustration for Jewish people. And then you have this sort of middle ground that maybe they have some criticisms of Jewish people that maybe some of them can make rational sense, but they don't necessarily have a hatred of Jews. That maybe if more people had that conversation, and this whole thing could get worked out. Like, this is, well, I'm frustrated about Jews because they do this sort of a thing. Okay, well, I don't like that. Let's talk about it. Then maybe we could have a rational conversation. But you really have mostly extremism on all sides and no room for a conversation at all.
Yeah, which is sad. Fortunately, I think Hungary still remains a place where there is common sense when it comes to this topic. There's not a lot of hysteria from both angles. Like, Hungarians are more interested in their own affairs. they might have an opinion when it comes to the Middle East conflict, but they don't put that at the top of their priority. So you don't see a lot of protests on the street or stickers, on universities, or even on Andrassy, which is one of the main avenues in Budapest, which I think is good. And what I don't know if you remember that, but at some point we were discussing about how funny it is that most of the Jewish community in Hungary is liberal, and they have no idea about what's going on in Israel. Do you still have that view, or has that shifted? Because I'm conscious that in Israel there was a wake-up call with October 7, and I had a chance to talk to a lot of left-leaning people who, after October 7, I wouldn't say they shift to the right, but they are not that optimism about the coexistence with Arabs anymore.
I don't know. I don't really talk to many people from the past anymore. I've only kept one contact from the Jewish community here in Budapest. I guess that's kind of a story I can bring up that maybe kind of ties into this, actually. That I was involved with the community here, and while I have some distant Jewish ancestry, I am not bar mitzvah Jew. I'm technically, for all intents and purposes, I'm not Jewish, but it's something I explored because of my great grandparents. So when I was in that community, I had an interesting moment with. This was the time when Houellebecq was a very important party as a competition of Fidesz. And Houellebecq was trying to rehabilitate their anti-Semitic past controversies. So they were reaching out to the Jewish community. And they wrote a letter to every rabbi in Budapest and maybe the whole country. And most of the rabbis came out with words of rejection. And I found it very interesting that the liberal community that I was a part of, one of the most liberal ones in Budapest, the rabbi actually wrote a letter saying that we accept your change of heart with open arms. We're going to be vigilant and make sure you keep to your word. But if you ever want to have discourse our community, learn more about Judaism, we welcome you. And I thought that was so wonderful. I thought that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. But the entire community turned on her. And I remember I was there at a Shabbat dinner, and everyone was shouting at her. They brought her to tears. I was the only person that took her side, like, hey, maybe consider this. And honestly, I couldn't go back after that. I couldn't go back. And we had an interesting talk, me and the rabbi, that the Jewish community is so fixated on the trauma of the Holocaust that they cannot see any of these societal conflicts rationally anymore. And it's to their disadvantage, and it may even lead to anti-Semitism in the future, was actually came up in our little chat about it, that I found quite interesting that, that dialogue with society, whether you find those people egregious and frustrating, needs to happen. Otherwise, nothing will change. And you can't be always defensive in a state of protecting yourself. That no change will come from that. You're always going to be a rock. You're going to have a wall. You're going to be fortified. And I just found that, I didn't want to be part of a community that felt that way towards someone who was leading them to better pastures.
Yeah, I was just thinking here while you were talking. Perhaps the reason why the Jewish community in Hungary and in Central Eastern Europe in general, like Czech Republic, I think is the same, Slovakia, Romania. I think the main reason maybe is related to the fact that they are still recovering from the trauma of the Holocaust. And they believe that the only threat will come from the right wing, because they suffered so much and they were prosecuted and all that. And everyone has an ancestor probably who was in a death camp or had a hell of a time in the 40s, and they cannot get rid of that. So perhaps it's because the Holocaust or the Shoah is still a very recent event, and that plays a part in the way they see politics.
I mean, most certainly, but then we can blame America again, because until the 1970s, the internal policy within Jewish communities was to not talk about it, to move on. And that's part of Jewish mourning tradition, is to sit Shiva for 7 days, mourning period's over. And you could philosophically apply this to the Holocaust, and it is what Jewish scholars did early on. It wasn't until Hollywood turned the Holocaust into sort of a kitsch market with Holocaust trauma, TV, movies, books. It became a whole industry of itself that has downstream negative effects on Jewish culture, but the incentive is there to maybe educate people and to also make money, and then to also maybe express trauma. So maybe there's three I could identify just off the top of my head, primary motivators to creating that sort of art that maybe it's not the best approach in the long run. And I mean, the great historian Houellebecq said this when the first Holocaust production, a TV series, came out in 1972. He said, "This is a mistake, and we're going to come to find it's a mistake, that the Holocaust should not be portrayed visually, that it should be studied and remembered in a different way." And yeah, here we are now. I think he was right.
So as we come to the last 10 or 15 minutes, there's one topic I don't want to neglect, and that's Asia, because you spend some time traveling there, and I believe for the most part you are based in South Korea. So I want to ask you, how was it to live in South Korea?
Oh, it's a very different culture. The collectivism is palpable. The intense work culture is not for me. The hierarchy is to the point where you think it's nice to respect your elders, but then you see in practice where you have stagnation in technology and companies because the elder, senior managers don't want to change things. They've been there so long. Especially you see this in banking, where all the banking technology, they're using fax machines. It's that outdated, literally fax machines. And you think of Korea as this high-tech place with robot waiters, and that's true, but there's vast elements of the culture that are outdated. And it's because of this hierarchy and seniority culture. So it's a complete other extreme of the way we've gone to the West, where we worship the youth. And you see the pitfalls of both sides when you live between these two cultures. You see the extremity of the West, extremity of the East, and you find both of them displeasing. And that's when you find that a place like Hungary, where things are a little bit in the middle, that you still have a culture of respect, you have a formality in language, you do have sort of kissing up to your boss, maybe as a remnant of the communist system, where you gotta lick the boots a little bit, but that's okay. And it's okay to have that in a way that's still generative, that doesn't go into the direction of the East, and in a way that doesn't go into let's throw away the old and only bring in the new of the West. And so it was a great, great learning experience for me to live in East Asian culture.
Yeah, I say each country has their own contradictions. There's no way that things are that straightforward. Whether you are in Asia, in America, in Europe, in Africa, there's no way around. Like, people are full of paradox. So why countries are not? There's no way around. At least that's what I would predict. In terms of their in terms of the tension with Kim Jong-un and North Korea and all that, is it something that is palpable on a day-to-day life, or it's more on the news and TV, on screens?
I'd say it's a mix. You definitely feel it coming into the country and how strict they are with security. For example, you cannot get a SIM card for the phone anywhere except the airport unless you have a Korean visa or passport. So if you go to the store, they're going to check everything to make sure that phone is legit to your name, and they're keeping track of all the lines you open. Whereas in America, I can just go and get a prepaid card, stick it in my phone. A lot of this intense security is because of that conflict. And then when you go up towards the north, you're driving along the coast, razor wire all across the beach, all the way up from a certain point on the peninsula, all the way north. It's just completely secure. There's guard towers all the way up the coast. Not all of them are manned, but they're there. They're ready at any moment to militarize if they need to. And I guess the fact of that is inescapable. You don't feel it in the day-to-day, but it looms over the culture, and especially for the young men who have mandatory military service, just like in Israel.
Yeah, that's a separate reality from Europe. Although there are more and more talks of introducing the mandatory military service, which I don't think is a total bad thing. Like, I haven't been to the military myself, but I get the concept. I think I had actually an American journalist who made Alia, and he was stating that it's good that we live in democracy, but it's also good to be reminded why you live in democracy. And the reason is that people fight for it. So it's not just sit and relax and enjoy. Sometimes people need to take some action, and it's not. And social media is not enough. I know that the youth think, I'm tweeting, so I'm doing my I'm doing my thing for peace. But there are people with the boots on the ground, and some of them return without a leg, and I think they should be honored.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of nasty stuff about the war, but in countries like Israel, there's no way around. Like, it's absolutely necessary, and I think it makes the country more of a community, which that's the way that Judaism works. So I think it makes sense. Of course, you wouldn't expect, I don't know, a mandatory military service in Iceland. Then they have access to guns, which is kind of weird. Why not? Yeah, they have access to guns, which is what's your opinion on? I haven't had this one in mind. What's your opinion on the guns issue?
Well, I'm definitely more American than European on the issue, but I'm definitely not fully American. I think self-defense is a very important right. Very important. I think Europe has gone too far, but I think it's a little bit too relaxed in America. I do think people should have, training, maybe licensing of some kind. I think it should be, in Hungary, I can join a hunting club. I can get a gun. It just takes time. It takes dedication. Maybe it's a little bit too strict, but I think something like that throughout Europe, where responsible people, and maybe even in school, maybe in high school, they take you out and they teach you how to shoot guns. I think that's maybe something America's missing now that they used to have, which made a lot more sense for having gun rights, is that they would train in school. I think you learn responsible gun safety. You learn that they're not something to be feared. They're a tool to be treated with respect. You're around other people. You have to watch for their safety, their eardrums and all that, your own safety. And I think if people are introduced to them in that way, it can be a living part of culture. When they're like this kind of a weird taboo thing that, maybe I'm going to get drunk and steal my dad's gun and shoot cans with friends, then you're talking about something totally different. It's got to be something ingrained in the culture. And if it's not ingrained in the culture, you need to have training and the proper licensing and the proper restrictions around it.
So just to finalize, just two questions. What's the thing that America should learn from Europe? And what's the thing that Europe should learn from America?
I think the Americans. That's a good question. The Americans
I
could
left it for
learn.
the end.
Yeah. The Americans could definitely learn some respect for the past. I think that in Europe, we were talking about France earlier and how they have this mastery of irony. It's partly because of their love of literature, their love of movies, their love of the arts. Any French person, if they're masterfully educated or just an ordinary person, is going to have some connection with the arts and good literature. It's just a living part of their culture. And you don't have that same level maybe in other European cultures, but more so in America. And I think that we could all learn from the French to look at the past and look at great works and learn from them. I think the Americans could teach Europeans to be a bit more optimistic and ambitious. I think that Europeans can be a little bit pessimistic, like, why am I going to even try to do that? I'm going to have to deal with this asshole and this government official, and it's just not even worth it. Whereas in America, they're probably going to grind their way through all those obstacles, and a special kind of European person does, but we need more of them. And if we took that one lesson from America, Europe could be a lot stronger and a lot more ambitious and a lot more competitive in the world stage.
Yeah, 100%. I think the best thing about America, at least from my perspective, is you guys are very much action orientated, and Europe lacks that. Europe really, it's behind when it comes to being hands-on and approach things and trying to figure it out what can be done. And the only way to have an understanding is to, being on the field and trying to measure by being involved. There's no way around. You can read all the books, you can watch all the podcasts, but the way to understand what is it about is to experience, to be exposed. And I think the Americans don't tend to fear that, and that's what I really admire. The other one, which I heard about it, but I'm not fully sure. It might be true, and I would like to get your comments as we finish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I heard that we Europeans are known also to be very, very envy. Let's say we are talking to someone who is super successful, and we would like to thrive in that field. So we are going to say, we're going to find excuses. Yeah, he managed because he is friends with X and he got that much of cash. It's not about his skills or ability. So we will try to portray that it's not exactly his merit. He was just lucky, or he knew the right people. Otherwise, he wouldn't be where he is. Whether in America is different. People are going to ask the person who is successful, how did he do it? If there's something that they can be part of, if there is some lesson they can share. And is that an honest feeling and approach, or not, in your view?
I think, unfortunately, Americans have become more like Europeans in that regard in recent years. I think the opportunities globally have been short. I mean, I've been in a very big rut with a job hunt in recent, last 2 years. It's been really hard to find stable work. I'm doing a lot of freelancing. I got laid off from my tech job. I fortunately got a nice severance so I could start some projects and, keep my ship afloat. But I mean, it's a tough market out there, and it really is who you know, unfortunately, nowadays in this current moment. Maybe there was a lot more opportunity 20, 30, 40 years ago, but I think people are unfortunately right to feel that way to an extent, because sure, if you know the right people, doesn't mean you don't have the merit, doesn't mean you're not smart. But it does mean that there's a lot of other people who did work hard, who aren't finding the opportunities that they were promised because this economy we're in is shit. And I think that since 2008, we've been really just putting Band-Aids on it, or just giving it like a stimulus injection, like a video game, like right to the heart.
Yeah.
Get going for a few years and then it slips again. And this is what I was talking about, relocalization. I think for people to get that sense of dignity back that we need, because we need to work as human beings, we need to be part of our society, contribute to it. We need to feel good about ourselves, that we're generating something. We need to feel part of something. I think that's something we need to work on individually as countries and start to kind of dial back this push towards infinite growth, this push towards American capitalism. And maybe the Americans are realizing that, but none of us are ready to accept the difficulty of the hard work it will take to transition, because it's not going to happen overnight. But yeah, I'm pessimistic, honestly, Vitor. To leave on a negative note, I'm pessimistic. I think we're going to have a lot of bad economy moving in the future before things get better. I think we're going to have a big shock, and then we're going to come to bring things down to the level of the nation and try to fix things locally.
Yeah, Roberto is just saying here, thank you both for your insights and culture and to share it with us. But we have to defend the West first. Just before we comment, I just want to say thank you, Roberto, for watching. I might have you here very soon to discuss your views on America and the world and Brazil. And Brazil, he's a Brazilian man, and he has a lot to tell on that regard. Just one comment on what you said before we close. I think it's not out of nothing that you know the right people. Like, for you to be in the mix, there is already a merit. Okay. Some people are born in the right place, right time, and all that. I get it. But for the most part, to have a network, it's already a skill. No, it doesn't happen.
It is, yeah.
Just because it's your attitude, it's your energy. Yes, it takes hard work. So I think that's very relevant. Are you planning to settle in Budapest for the next few years?
Oh, I want to plant my roots here. I want to stay. I mean, it's part of my heritage, and I think it's a great place to raise a family. I'm looking to start a business soon here, and I'm just locked in. I love it. I love Europe. I agree with Roberto. We got to save the West, but for me, the West is Europe. You guys can do whatever you want in the New World. You can work something out with the Americans. But yeah, I'm all about it. I'm all about Europe. I'm all about Hungary, and I really want to stay here. And I hope things will start to get better. We'll start to get ourselves out of this economic rut and make Europe great again.
Yeah, I kind of expect that you'll be more interested in Europe than in America, unless we have changed a lot. But that would be a shock. Look, I enjoyed talking to you as usual. I wasn't drinking this time, but I promise I will. So it won't be just you. So we will have a few frats in Hungary.
Well, we could do a part 2 with more drinking, because I could have drank more. It's just a little bit.
Why am I not surprised?
Well, you know me. I like to end my day with a nice glass of whiskey and a good smoke.
Yeah, that's a great way. I might be in Hungary in the summer. I'm thinking to go. I think there's a wedding that we'll attend in Romania, and then on the way back, because my girlfriend is Hungarian. She's from she's Ukrainian with a Hungarian ethnicity. So I go back to Hungary often. Like I wasn't there last year, but I plan to this year because there is this wedding in Romania, and then maybe we do a few days in Budapest, and we have to meet and have that brunch or beer or whatever we access.
A little palinka, maybe.
Or palinka. We get them all. Look, great talking to you, and stay in touch, and all the best for your Substack.
Oh yes, and I'll just drop the link. It's utterlycorrect.substack.com. So take a look. I write mostly weekly, sometimes twice a week, and enjoy. Thank you for having me, Vitor. It was wonderful, and I look forward to also hearing Roberto on your podcast, because I appreciate his comments today.
All right. Have a good one. Take care. Take care, buddy.
Cheers.